The mining station Kepler 442b hung like a metallic spider in the void. Its industrial arms extended toward the asteroid field that had made the outer rim colonies profitable. Captain Zextar of the Hegemony cruiser. Dominant Claw studied the human installation through his tactical display, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Intelligence suggested minimal defensive capabilities, perhaps a few automated turrets, maybe a patrol craft or two. Nothing that couldn't be swept aside by his battle group of 12 warships. "Sir, we're detecting a single human vessel departing the station," reported his tactical officer, a young Vrexani whose scales still gleamed with the bright colors of inexperience. "Small craft appears to be a personal transport or cargo hauler." Zextar's compound eyes swiveled to examine the readout. The ship was indeed tiny by military standards, barely larger than a fighter craft. Its energy signature suggested minimal armament, if any. "Let it go," he commanded with a dismissive wave of his primary manipulator. "We have bigger prey to concern ourselves with." The human vessel, designated as Lucky Penny according to their intercepts, continued on a trajectory toward the inner system, seemingly oblivious to the Hegemony fleet lurking in the shadow of the largest asteroid. Zextar felt a surge of predatory satisfaction. Soon this entire sector would fall under Hegemony control, and the humans would learn what it meant to challenge a superior species. "Begin the attack," he ordered. The Hegemony fleet emerged from concealment like a pack of void hunters, weapons charging with the distinctive whine of particle accelerators. The mining station's automated defenses came online immediately, but they were woefully inadequate against a force this size. Defensive turrets swiveled and fired, their projectiles sparking harmlessly against military-grade shields. Aboard the Lucky Penny, 17-year-old Sarah Chen finished her pre-flight checklist and settled back in the pilot's seat with a cup of synthetic coffee. She'd been running supplies between the mining station and the inner colonies for 3 years now, ever since her parents had been killed in a transport accident. The station's administrator, Old Pete, had taken her in and given her a job flying his personal courier ship. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep her fed and gave her the freedom she craved. She was halfway through updating her navigation logs when proximity alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. Sarah's head snapped up, coffee forgotten as her sensor display painted a picture that made her blood run cold. 12 hostile contacts, massive and moving fast, bearing down on the mining station. "This is Lucky Penny to Kepler Station," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You've got incoming hostiles, looks like a full battle group. I count 12 heavy cruisers, Hegemony configuration." "Copy that, Lucky Penny," came Pete's gruff voice over the comm. "Sarah, you need to get out of there now. Jump to the inner system and warn the Colonial Defense Force. We'll hold them as long as we can." Sarah's hands moved across her control panels with practiced efficiency, but she didn't engage the jump drive. Instead, she brought her ship around in a wide arc, putting distance between herself and the attacking fleet while keeping them in sensor range. The Lucky Penny wasn't much to look at, a modified cargo hauler with aging engines and a hull that had seen better decades, but she'd made extensive modifications during her years of flying alone. On the surface, she appeared to be fleeing. In reality, she was calculating vectors and distances, preparing for something the Hegemony would never expect from a seemingly helpless civilian vessel. The first salvo from the Hegemony fleet lit up the void like a miniature star. Particle beams and plasma torpedoes hammered into the mining station's shields, causing them to flare and buckle. The station's defensive fire became more sporadic as turrets were systematically destroyed or overwhelmed. "Lucky Penny, what's your status?" Pete's voice crackled over the comm, strained with the effort of coordinating the station's hopeless defense. "Still here, Pete," Sarah replied, her eyes never leaving her tactical display. The Hegemony ships had formed a loose sphere around the station, pouring fire into it from all angles. But they'd made a critical error in positioning. They were focused entirely on their target, paying no attention to the small civilian craft that appeared to be fleeing toward the system's edge. Sarah's fingers danced across her weapon controls, bringing online systems that didn't appear on any official manifest. The Lucky Penny had started life as a simple cargo hauler, but 3 years of modifications had transformed it into something else entirely. Hidden beneath its unremarkable hull were missile tubes salvaged from a decommissioned destroyer, point defense arrays that could track and eliminate incoming projectiles, and a power core that had been carefully upgraded to military specifications. Most importantly, concealed in a specially modified cargo bay, was a Mark 7 nuclear warhead that Sarah had acquired through channels she preferred not to think about too closely. It was old, but it was functional, and it was about to teach the hegemony a lesson about underestimating humans. Target acquired, she whispered to herself as her targeting computer achieved a lock on the largest hegemony vessel, Zextar's flagship. The ship was massive, its hull bristling with weapons and its shields glowing with absorbed energy from the station's desperate defensive fire. Sarah took a deep breath and began her attack. Run! The Lucky Penny accelerated toward the Teal hegemony fleet at maximum burn, her engines redlined and her hull groaning under the stress. To the aliens, she appeared to be making a suicidal attempt to ram one of their vessels. Futile gesture of human stubbornness that would accomplish nothing except her own destruction. They couldn't have been more wrong. At precisely the right moment, Sarah triggered her hidden missile tubes. 6 military-grade torpedoes burst from concealed launchers, their drives igniting as they streaked toward the hegemony flagship. The aliens barely had time to register the threat before the missiles impacted their rear shields, designed to defend against the mining station's weak weapons, not military-grade ordnance. The explosion sent ripples of energy across the flagship's hull, and Sarah smiled grimly as she saw shield strength indicators dropping. But that was just the opening move. As the hegemony fleet began to turn their attention toward the unexpected threat, Sarah executed a maneuver that would have been impossible in a standard cargo hauler. Her modified maneuvering thrusters fired in a complex sequence, sending the Lucky Penny into a spiraling dive that brought her beneath the enemy formation. Point defense arrays tracked incoming fire with mechanical precision, creating a protective barrier of intercepted projectiles around her ship. And all the while, she was broadcasting a message on all frequencies, a message that would change everything. This is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Colonial Defense Force Special Operations. Her voice carried across space with cold authority. You have attacked a civilian installation under colonial protection. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. The transmission was a lie. Sarah had never been military, had no rank, no authority. But the hegemony didn't know that, and her actions suggested otherwise. Captain Zextar stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief. The small human vessel that had appeared to be fleeing was now dancing through his formation like a predator among prey, its weapons fire far more accurate and devastating than should have been possible from such a craft. His flagship's shields were down to 60% and falling, while 3 of his escort vessels were reporting significant damage. Sir, that's impossible, his tactical officer chittered, his scales now pale with fear. Our intelligence indicated no military presence in this sector. How can a civilian cargo hauler carry such armament? Because it's not a civilian cargo hauler, you fool, Zextar snarled, his mandibles snapping with frustration. Signal the fleet. Concentrate all fire on that ship. I want it destroyed immediately. But as the hegemony vessels turned their weapons toward the Lucky Penny, Sarah Chen was already 3 moves ahead. She'd spent years studying hegemony tactics, learning their standard formations and response protocols. They were powerful, but they were also predictable, and predictability was a weakness she could exploit. Her ship rolled and twisted through space with impossible grace, modified maneuvering systems allowing her to pull acceleration that would have turned a normal human into paste. The pilot's chair she'd installed was military surplus, designed to compensate for extreme G-forces, and her body had been conditioned by years of high-stress flying in dangerous asteroid fields. Particle beams sliced through the void where she'd been moments before, and plasma torpedoes detonated harmlessly against space as she danced between them. But Sarah wasn't just evading. She was positioning herself for the next phase of her assault. Come on, you alien bastards, she muttered through gritted teeth as she lined up her next target. Let me show you what humans do to bullies. The second wave of missiles erupted from the Lucky Penny's hidden launchers, but these were different from the first. These carried specialized payloads, electromagnetic pulse warheads designed to disrupt enemy electronics. They struck 2 of the smaller hegemony vessels simultaneously, and Sarah watched with satisfaction as their lights went dark and their engines died. Meanwhile, aboard the mining station, Old Pete and his skeleton crew watched the impossible battle unfolding before them with a mixture of awe and terror. The station's shields were failing, their weapons were nearly depleted, and they were minutes away from being overwhelmed. But somehow, impossibly, one small ship was holding off an entire battle group. "Pete," came Sarah's voice over the calm despite the chaos around her. "You need to get everyone to the emergency shelters now. I'm about to try something really stupid." "Sarah, what are you planning?" Pete asked, though he was already issuing evacuation orders to his crew. He'd known the girl for 3 years, had watched her grow from a traumatized teenager into a skilled pilot, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined she was capable of. "Trust me," was all she said before cutting the channel. Sarah's plan was indeed stupid, bordering on suicidal, but it was also the only chance they had. The Mark 7 warhead in her cargo bay was powerful enough to take out a capital ship, but only if she could get close enough to deliver it. And there was only one way to guarantee that kind of proximity. She began broadcasting again, this time on a frequency she knew the hegemony would be monitoring. "This is Lieutenant Chen to Hegemony Fleet Commander. I'm prepared to discuss terms for the surrender of this station." Zextar's attention immediately focused on the transmission. Despite the damage this lone human had inflicted on his fleet, he was still confident of victory. Perhaps she could be reasoned with, convinced to stand down before he was forced to destroy her. "Human vessel, this is Captain Zextar of the Hegemony Expeditionary Force," he transmitted back. "You have fought well, but you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and I give you my word that the station's inhabitants will be treated according to the laws of war." Sarah almost laughed at that. The hegemony's idea of following the laws of war typically involved enslaving any survivors and strip mining entire worlds. But she played along, allowing her ship to slow its evasive maneuvers and drift closer to the flagship. "I'm prepared to come aboard your vessel to discuss terms," she transmitted, "but I'll need guarantees for the safety of the mining station personnel." Zextar's compound eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The human was finally seeing reason. "Acceptable. You may dock with our primary airlock, but be warned, any treachery will result in the immediate destruction of your station." "Understood," Sarah replied, and began a docking approach toward the Hegemony flagship. But as she drew closer, she activated a different system entirely, one that would have terrified the aliens if they'd known what it was. Hidden throughout the Lucky Penny's hull were shaped charges designed to turn the entire ship into a massive kinetic projectile. Combined with the nuclear warhead in her cargo bay, her vessel had effectively become a guided missile capable of penetrating even capital ship armor. The Hegemony crew watched her approach with the arrogance of conquerors, never suspecting that they were about to become the victims of humanity's oldest and most effective military tactic. The last-ditch suicide attack that had broken enemy morale from ancient times to the space age. Sarah sat in her pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls as the alien ship grew larger in her view screen. She thought about her parents, killed in what everyone had assumed was an accident, but which she'd always suspected was sabotage by hegemony sympathizers. She thought about old Pete and the miners who had become her family, facing slavery or death at alien hands. She thought about all the human colonies that would fall if the hegemony wasn't stopped here and now. Her finger hovered over the detonation control, waiting for the perfect moment. But then something unexpected happened. Her long-range sensors detected new contacts jumping into the system. A lot of them. Sarah's eyes widened as she counted the new arrivals. 24 ships, definitely human, and moving fast toward their position. "This is Admiral Rebecca Torres of the Colonial Defense Force 3rd Fleet," came a crisp, professional voice over the comm. "All hegemony vessels, you are ordered to stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded. This system is under colonial protection, and your presence here constitutes an act of war." Zextar's mandibles clicked frantically as his tactical display updated with the new arrivals. A full CDF battle fleet, appearing as if summoned from nowhere. His intelligence had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. This wasn't an undefended mining operation. It was a trap. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice trembling with fear. "The human fleet is moving to surround us. They're jamming our FTL drives. We can't jump out." Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the hegemony formation begin to break apart. Individual ships trying to find escape routes that didn't exist. The CDF fleet moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, cutting off every avenue of retreat while maintaining perfect firing solutions on the alien vessels. "Lucky Penny," came Admiral Torres' voice over a private channel. "This is Admiral Torres. We received your emergency beacon and came as fast as we could. What's your status?" Sarah blinked in confusion. "Emergency beacon?" "Admiral, I didn't send any emergency beacon." There was a pause. Then Torres' voice returned with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. "The hell you didn't, pilot. Your ship has been broadcasting Colonial Defense Force emergency codes for the past 10 minutes. Military-grade encryption, highest priority. Those codes are only known to CDF Special Operations personnel." The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The ship she'd been flying for 3 years, the modifications she'd thought she'd made herself, none of it had been what it seemed. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the CDF battleship Indomitable, studying the tactical situation with the cool professionalism that had earned her command of the Third Fleet. The hegemony force was trapped, their escape routes cut off by her ships. But something about this entire scenario bothered her. According to intelligence, there should have been no military assets in this sector. Yet somehow a single ship had held off 12 enemy vessels until her fleet could arrive. "Tactical. Give me a full scan of that civilian vessel," she ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." "Aye, Admiral," her tactical officer responded, fingers dancing across his console. "Ma'am, this is unusual. The ship reads as a standard Hermes-class cargo hauler on the surface, but I'm detecting significant modifications. Hidden weapon systems, military-grade point defenses, and..." He paused, double-checking his readings. "Admiral, there's a nuclear device aboard that vessel. Mark 7 warhead, fully armed." Torres felt a chill run down her spine. A Mark 7 was enough to level a small city, or in this case, punch a hole through the hull of a capital ship. "Get me a direct line to that pilot immediately." Meanwhile, Sarah Chen sat in stunned silence as the implications of Admiral Torres's words sank in. The ship she'd thought was her own, the modifications she'd believed she'd made with salvaged parts and ingenuity. The weapon systems that had seemed almost too good to be true, none of it had been her doing. "Lucky Penny. Please respond," came Torres's voice, more urgent now. "We need to know your status and intent." Sarah keyed her comm with shaking hands. "Admiral Torres, this is Sarah Chen. I think I need to explain some things, but I honestly don't know where to start." "Start with who you really are," Torres replied. "Because according to our records, Sarah Chen is supposed to be a 17-year-old civilian pilot with no military training. Yet you just took on a hegemony battle group single-handed and lived to tell about it." "That's exactly who I am," Sarah said, her voice cracking slightly. "At least I thought it was. Admiral, I've been flying this ship for 3 years, ever since my parents died. Old Pete gave me a job running supplies, and I've been making modifications to improve performance. But apparently someone else has been making modifications too." She paused, trying to organize her thoughts while keeping one eye on the hegemony fleet, which seemed frozen in indecision. The weapon systems, the enhanced maneuvering capability, even this nuclear warhead, I didn't install any of it. It was just there when I needed it. Torres exchanged glances with her intelligence officer, a thin woman named Commander Hayes, who specialized in the kind of operations that officially didn't exist. Hayes nodded slightly, confirming what Torres was beginning to suspect. "Miss Chen," Torres said carefully, "I need you to think back over the past 3 years. Has anyone had access to your ship? Anyone who might have had the resources and expertise to make these kinds of modifications without your knowledge?" Sarah's mind raced through memories of her time on the mining station. Old Pete had been like a father to her, teaching her to fly and giving her a purpose when her world had fallen apart. The other miners had been kind but distant, treating her more like a mascot than a real person. And then there were the occasional visitors, supply ships, corporate inspectors, the occasional military patrol checking on the outer rim colonies. "Wait," she said suddenly. "There was someone. About 6 months after I started flying, this guy showed up claiming to be a ship inspector from the Colonial Authority. He spent 2 days going over the Lucky Penny with some kind of scanner, said he was checking for safety violations. Pete vouched for him, said he was legitimate." "Describe him," Torres ordered. Tall, maybe 40 years old, gray hair, military bearing. He had this way of moving like he was always ready for trouble. Called himself Inspector Morrison, but... Sarah paused, a memory surfacing. His hands. He had surgical scars on his hands like he'd had cybernetic implants removed. Commander Hayes leaned forward, her expression intense. Admiral, I think we need to brief Miss Chen on Project Shepherd. Torres was quiet for a long moment, weighing security protocols against the reality of their situation. Finally, she nodded. Miss Chen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 years ago, we received intelligence that the hegemony was planning a series of attacks on outer rim colonies, designed to test our response capabilities and identify weaknesses in our defenses. Sarah listened with growing amazement as Torres continued. We couldn't reinforce every potential target without revealing our intelligence sources, so we developed an alternative strategy. We identified key civilians in vulnerable locations and provided them with enhanced capabilities, using deep cover operatives to install military-grade equipment in their personal vessels. You turned me into a weapon, Sarah said, her voice flat with shock. We gave you the tools to protect yourself and others, Torres corrected. The choice of whether to use them was always yours. And based on what we just witnessed, you made the right choice. The hegemony fleet was still holding position, clearly uncertain how to proceed in the face of overwhelming opposition. Captain Zexitar had been requesting instructions from his superiors for several minutes, but the FTL jammers were preventing any long-range communication. Admiral, Sarah said, what happens now? To the hegemony ships, I mean. That depends on whether they're smart enough to surrender, Torres replied. We have them completely outgunned, but cornered animals sometimes do stupid things. As if summoned by her words, Zexitar's voice crackled over the general comm frequency. Human vessels, this is Captain Zexitar of the Hegemony Expeditionary Force. I demand to speak with your commanding officer. Torres activated her comm system, her voice carrying the full authority of her rank. This is Admiral Torres, commanding the Colonial Defense Force 3rd Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned, Captain. I strongly advise you to surrender your vessels and prepare to be taken into custody. Surrender? Zexitar's mandibles clicked with what might have been laughter. Admiral, you seem to be under the impression that this battle is over. I assure you it has barely begun. Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched her sensor displays. The hegemony ships were changing formation, moving into a tight defensive sphere with their most heavily armed vessel at the center. But that wasn't what worried her. It was the energy readings she was detecting from their flagship. Admiral Torres, she transmitted urgently, the hegemony flagship is charging something big. Energy readings are off the charts, and it's not any weapon system I recognize. Torres was already seeing the same readings on her own displays. All ships, emergency scatter pattern, she ordered. Move to maximum safe distance immediately. But even as the CDF fleet began to disperse, Sarah realized it might not be enough. Whatever the hegemony was preparing, it was designed to take out multiple targets simultaneously. The formation scatter would save some ships, but others would inevitably be caught in the blast radius. She looked down at her own weapons console, where a single red button marked with hegemony symbols had appeared, apparently another gift from her mysterious benefactor. According to the readout, it would overload her ship's power core and turn the Lucky Penny into a massive electromagnetic pulse weapon, capable of disabling every ship within 1,000 kilometers. The catch, of course, was that she would be at the center of the explosion. Sarah's hands moved to her comm controls, opening a channel to the mining station. Pete, are you there? Old Pete's gruff voice came through clearly, tinged with worry. I'm here, kiddo. You did good out there. Real good. Pete, I need you to know that you saved my life when you took me in. You gave me a family when I had nothing. I want you to remember that, okay? There was a long pause before Pete responded, his voice suddenly understanding and afraid. Sarah, what are you planning? What I have to do, she replied simply and cut the channel before he could argue. She opened a fleet-wide channel, her young voice carrying across the void to every ship in both fleets. This is Sarah Chen aboard the Lucky Penny. All vessels prepare for electromagnetic pulse in 30 seconds. Recommend emergency shutdown of all non-essential systems. Admiral Torres's voice came back immediately. Miss Chen, belay that order. We can find another way. No, Admiral, we can't, Sarah replied, her finger hovering over the red button. Whatever they're charging up over there is going to kill a lot of good people. I won't let that happen. She thought about her parents, about old Pete, about all the miners who had become her family. She thought about the colonies that would fall if the hegemony learned they could attack with impunity. And she thought about the mysterious operative who had given her these tools, trusting a teenager to make the hard choices when the time came. "Tell everyone I was proud to serve," she said, and pressed the button. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the lucky penny was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of the violent explosion she'd braced herself for, there was a moment of perfect silence as every electrical system within 1,000 kilometers simply stopped. Ship lights went dark, engines died, and communication arrays fell silent as the pulse washed over both fleets like an invisible tide. But Sarah was still alive. She sat in her pilot's chair, staring at displays that should have been dead, breathing air that should have been venting into space from a shattered hull. Emergency lighting bathed her cockpit in a soft red glow, and her life support systems hummed quietly around her. According to her status display, the lucky penny was not only intact but fully operational. "What the hell?" she whispered, running system diagnostics with shaking hands. Everything checked out perfectly, as if the EMP had somehow passed through her ship without affecting it at all. Around her, the void was filled with drifting hulks. The hegemony fleet hung powerless in space, their sleek warships reduced to inert metal sculptures. The CDF vessels were in similar condition, though Sarah could see emergency lighting beginning to flicker on several of them as backup systems came online. A new voice crackled over her comm system, one she'd never heard before but which carried unmistakable authority. "Miss Chen, this is Commander Morrison. Please respond." Sarah's blood chilled. Morrison, the ship inspector who had visited 3 years ago, the man who had apparently turned her cargo hauler into a military weapon. "How are you contacting me?" "Everyone's systems are down." "Not everyone's," Morrison replied. "Your ship was specifically shielded against its own EMP weapon. We couldn't very well have you destroy yourself in the process of saving others, could we?" "We?" Sarah demanded. "Who the hell are you people?" There was a pause, then Morrison's voice returned with what sounded like genuine warmth. "We're the people who've been watching over you for the past 3 years, Sarah, and you've exceeded every expectation we had." Before Sarah could respond, her long-range sensors detected new contacts entering the system. 3 ships, sleek and fast, bearing no identification markings but clearly human in design. They moved through the debris field of disabled vessels like sharks among sleeping fish, heading directly for her position. "Miss Chen," came Admiral Torres's voice, weak and crackling with static as the Indomitable's backup systems struggled to maintain communications. "Be advised we have unknown contacts approaching your position. We're working to restore main power but estimate at least 30 minutes before we can provide assistance." "Copy that, Admiral," Sarah replied, but her attention was focused on the approaching ships. They moved with the kind of precision that spoke of highly skilled pilots and advanced technology. As they drew closer, she could see that they were unlike any human vessels she'd encountered before. Sleek, angular craft that seemed to bend light around their hulls. "Miss Chen," Morrison's voice came again. "Please prepare to receive boarders." "We need to have a conversation." "I'm not going anywhere with you people," Sarah said firmly. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but—" "We want to offer you a job," Morrison interrupted. "The same job we offered your parents 15 years ago." Sarah's world seemed to tilt sideways. "My parents? They were civilian transport pilots. They died in an accident." "They were colonial intelligence operatives," Morrison said gently. "Deep cover agents working to identify hegemony infiltration networks in the outer colonies. And they didn't die in an accident, Sarah. They were murdered by hegemony sympathizers who discovered their real identities." The lead mysterious ship was now alongside the Lucky Penny, and Sarah could see an airlock extending toward her own docking port. Part of her wanted to flee, to fire up her engines and run as far and fast as possible, but another part of her, the part that had always known there was more to her parents' death than the official report suggested, needed to hear the truth. "Permission to come aboard?" Morrison asked. Sarah made her decision. Granted, the man who stepped through her airlock was exactly as she remembered him, tall, graying with the bearing of a career military officer. But now she noticed details she'd missed before. The way his eyes constantly scanned for threats, the subtle bulge of weapons concealed beneath his civilian clothes, the surgical scars on his hands that spoke of cybernetic enhancements. "Hello, Sarah," he said simply. "I'm sorry we had to meet again under these circumstances. Are you really Morrison?" she asked. "Or is that just another cover identity?" "My real name is Commander James Archer, Colonial Intelligence Service Special Operations Division," he replied. Morrison was indeed a cover identity, but everything I told you about being there to ensure your safety was true. Sarah gestured around her modified cockpit. "All of this, the weapons, the shields, the EMP device. You installed it all while I thought I was just flying a cargo hauler." "We installed the hardware," Archer confirmed. "But the skill to use it effectively, the courage to face down a hegemony battle group, the judgment to know when to risk everything to save others, that was all you. We gave you tools. You made yourself into a weapon." Through her viewport, Sarah could see that power was beginning to return to some of the disabled ships. Emergency lighting flickered on hulls throughout both fleets, and she could hear chatter over the comm channels as crews worked to restore their vessels to operational status. "The hegemony ships will be back online soon," Archer observed. "Their technology is remarkably resilient. We estimate 15 minutes before they regain basic functionality, 30 before they're combat capable again." "What about Admiral Torres and the CDF fleet?" "Similar timeline," Archer said. "But here's the thing, Sarah. When those ships come back online, this battle isn't over. The hegemony wasn't just testing our defenses with this attack. They were positioning assets for something much larger." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature control. "What kind of something larger?" Archer activated a holographic display that showed the local star system and several surrounding sectors. Red markers indicated hegemony fleet positions while blue showed colonial forces. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling. The aliens had positioned significant forces throughout the region, all converging on strategic points. "Invasion," Archer said simply. "Full-scale conquest of the Outer Rim colonies using the system as a staging point. What happened here today was supposed to be a quick victory that would give them control of the mining facilities and a forward base. Instead, it's become a tactical disaster that's exposed their entire operation. But they'll adapt," Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. "They'll change their plans, hit us somewhere else, somewhere we're not prepared." "Exactly," Archer confirmed. "Unless we can convince them that their intelligence is fundamentally flawed, that every Outer Rim colony is better defended than they believed. We need them to think that what happened here could happen anywhere." Sarah studied the tactical display, seeing the implications. "You want me to help you create the illusion that the entire colonial defense force is more capable than it actually is." "We want you to help us save human civilization," Archer corrected. "The hegemony has been preparing for this invasion for decades. They outnumber us, outgun us, and have technology we can barely comprehend. Our only advantage is that they don't understand us. They don't understand human adaptability, human ingenuity, or human determination." He gestured toward the disabled fleets around them. "Today you proved that a single human with the right tools and the will to use them can accomplish the impossible. We want to give that capability to others, create a network of operatives throughout the colonies who can respond to threats with the kind of effectiveness you've demonstrated." "A network of teenagers flying modified cargo haulers?" Sarah asked skeptically. "A network of people who understand what they're fighting for," Archer replied. "Age doesn't matter, Sarah. Background doesn't matter. What matters is the willingness to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them." Alarms began sounding throughout the system as the first hegemony vessel restored power to its engines. Captain Zextar's flagship was already maneuvering, trying to break free of the engagement zone before the CDF fleet could fully recover. "They're going to run," Sarah observed. "Some of them," Archer agreed, "but not all. And the ones who escape will carry word back to their commanders about what they encountered here. That's actually exactly what we want, confused. Contradictory reports about human capabilities that will make the hegemony leadership question their intelligence and delay their invasion plans." Sarah watched as more ships began to come online, both human and alien. The battle was about to resume, but now it would be different. Now it would be fought between opponents who understood the stakes involved. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Commander Archer moved to Sarah's tactical station with the fluid efficiency of someone who had operated in hostile territory for decades. His fingers danced across controls that shouldn't have existed on a civilian vessel, bringing up displays that revealed the true extent of the Lucky Penny's hidden capabilities. First lesson, he said, highlighting several ships on the tactical display. Information warfare is just as important as conventional weapons. Every sensor reading the hegemony takes back to their fleet commanders. Every communication they intercept, every assumption they make about our capabilities, all of it becomes intelligence that shapes their future decisions. Sarah watched as he tagged 3 specific hegemony vessels among the slowly recovering fleet. Those ships need to escape, Archer continued. They carry the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering equipment, which means their reports will carry the most weight with hegemony command. But they also need to be damaged enough to make their escape seem costly. You want me to let them go, Sarah said, understanding the strategy. But make them think they barely survived something much worse than what actually happened. Exactly. Archer's smile was grim but approving. The ship that doesn't return at all tells no story. The ship that limps home with tales of overwhelming human firepower and unexpected tactical capabilities, that ship becomes a weapon in our psychological warfare arsenal. Through the viewport, they could see Admiral Torres's flagship beginning to maneuver as its main drives came back online. The CDF fleet was recovering faster than the alien vessels, their crews more experienced with emergency procedures and backup systems. But Sarah knew that advantage wouldn't last long. Lucky Penny, this is Admiral Torres, came the crisp voice over the comm. What's your status? We're reading 3 unknown vessels in your immediate vicinity. Admiral, this is Sarah Chen. I'm debriefing with Colonial Intelligence. The unknown vessels are friendly. She looked at Archer, who nodded approvingly. We have a tactical situation that requires immediate coordination. Copy that. Lucky Penny, stand by for fleet tactical data link. Sarah's display suddenly expanded as her ship connected to the CDF fleet's combat network. She could see every vessel, every weapon system, every damage report updated in real time. But more importantly, she could see the bigger picture, and it was worse than she'd thought. Admiral, Archer said, taking over the comm. This is Commander Archer, Colonial Intelligence. We need to discuss immediate tactical priorities. Commander? Torres replied, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and suspicion. I was beginning to wonder when you people would show up. What's the situation? The situation is that this attack was a probe, Archer replied bluntly. Intelligence suggests the hegemony has been positioning forces throughout this sector for a major offensive. What happens in the next 30 minutes will determine whether that offensive proceeds as planned or gets delayed while they reassess our capabilities. Sarah studied the tactical display as more hegemony ships came online. Captain Zextar's flagship was fully operational now, its weapons charging as it prepared to continue the battle. But she could see confusion in their formation. They were used to fighting opponents who followed predictable tactical doctrines, not enemies who employed electromagnetic pulse weapons and appeared to have capabilities far beyond their apparent size and composition. Commander Archer, Sarah said, what about the mining station? If this battle continues, they're going to be caught in the crossfire. Already handled, Archer replied, indicating a section of his display. Emergency evacuation ships are en route. The miners will be clear of the engagement zone within 10 minutes. As if summoned by his words, Sarah's sensors detected the approach of several fast civilian transports, their hulls marked with Colonial Emergency Services identification. They moved with purpose toward the mining station, ready to evacuate the civilian population before the battle resumed. Sarah, came old Pete's voice over a private channel. What the hell is going on out there? First you're fighting a whole fleet by yourself. Then everything goes dark and now these spooks are telling us we need to evacuate. Pete, just do what they say, Sarah replied, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she might never see him again. Get everyone out of there and don't look back. I'll explain everything later. You damn well better, Pete replied, but she could hear the affection in his gruff voice. And Sarah? You be careful out there. That's an order. Copy that, Pete. Sarah out. Archer was manipulating the tactical display, showing Sarah formations and attack patterns with the ease of someone who had spent years studying hegemony combat doctrine. The key to making this work is precision, he explained. We need to inflict just enough damage to make them respect our capabilities without destroying so many ships that they can't report back. What about Admiral Torres and the CDF fleet? Sarah asked. Are they in on this? Admiral Torres knows what she needs to know, Archer replied diplomatically. She's an excellent tactical commander, and she'll follow her orders to defend this system and protect civilian lives. That's exactly what we need her to do. Sarah was beginning to understand the layers of deception involved. The CDF fleet would fight conventionally, doing exactly what the hegemony expected them to do, but hidden assets like her own ship would provide unexpected capabilities that would confuse enemy intelligence and create the impression of human tactical innovations that didn't actually exist on a widespread basis. There, Archer said, highlighting a specific point on the tactical display. The hegemony is forming up for another assault on the mining station. They think the EMP disabled our fleet long enough for them to complete their original mission. Sarah could see the alien ships moving into attack formation, their weapons charging as they prepared to finish what they'd started. But now she had advantages they didn't know about. Detailed intelligence on their tactics, weapons specifically designed to counter their technology, and most importantly, the element of surprise. All right, she said, moving to her pilot station. Let's give them something to think about. The Lucky Penny separated from Archer's stealth ships and accelerated toward the hegemony formation. To enemy sensors, it would appear to be another desperate attack by a lone civilian vessel. They couldn't know that Sarah now had access to real-time intelligence from 3 stealth reconnaissance ships and the tactical coordination of the CDF fleet. Lucky Penny. This is Admiral Torres, came the concerned voice over the comm. You're moving into the enemy formation. State your intentions, Admiral. This is Sarah Chen. I'm going to show them what happens when you threaten human civilians. She brought her ship into weapons range just as the hegemony vessels opened fire on the mining station. Their particle beams and plasma torpedoes hammered into the facility's shields, which flared and buckled under the assault. But this time Sarah was ready for them. Her first salvo was different from anything she'd used. Before, specialized rounds that Archer's people had loaded into her missile tubes while she'd been unconscious from the EMP blast. These weren't designed to destroy enemy ships, but to mark them, creating sensor signatures that would make them visible to every weapon system in the CDF fleet. The missiles struck their targets with precision, and suddenly the hegemony ships found themselves outlined in energy that made them perfect targets for long-range fire. Admiral Torres didn't waste the opportunity. Her fleet's heavy guns opened up from maximum range. Their targeting computers locked onto the highlighted enemy vessels. Captain Zextar's tactical officer chittered in alarm as his displays showed incoming fire from positions that should have been impossible to target from. Sir, they're hitting us with precision fire from beyond our own maximum range. How is this possible? It's not possible, Zextar snarled, but even as he spoke, his ship shuddered under the impact of a particle beam that had somehow threaded its way through his defensive formation to strike a vulnerable section of hull. Sarah danced through the enemy formation, her ship's enhanced maneuverability, allowing her to avoid return fire while continuing to mark targets for the CDF fleet. But she was also selecting specific ships for special treatment, the 3 intelligence vessels that Archer wanted to escape with dramatic stories. Her weapons fire was precisely calibrated, inflicting damage that looked catastrophic on sensors, but was actually carefully targeted to disable specific systems while leaving the ships capable of escape. She took out weapons arrays, damaged engines just enough to reduce speed, and created hull breaches that would require immediate attention but wouldn't prove fatal. To the hegemony crews, it appeared that the lone human ship was systematically destroying their most important vessels with impossible precision. They couldn't know that Sarah was actually ensuring their survival, while making that survival appear to be nothing more than lucky chance. All ships, Zextar transmitted to his fleet. Emergency withdrawal. We are facing capabilities that were not in our intelligence reports. Fall back to jump position and prepare for immediate departure. The hegemony fleet began to disengage, their formation breaking apart as individual ships maneuvered toward the edge of the system. But as they retreated, they were carefully herded by Sarah's attacks in the CDF. The aftermath of the battle found Sarah Chen floating in space aboard the Lucky Penny, watching as the last of the hegemony vessels disappeared into hyperspace. The mining station was secure, its civilian population successfully evacuated, and the CDF fleet was conducting damage assessments. But she knew this was only the beginning of something much larger. The 3 intelligence ships escaped exactly as planned, Commander Archer reported, his voice carrying satisfaction. Our analysis of their sensor readings suggests they'll report facing a human fleet with capabilities far beyond current hegemony intelligence estimates. That should buy us some time. Admiral Torres had requested a full debriefing, and her flagship was approaching the Lucky Penny with clear intent to bring Sarah aboard for questioning. But Archer's stealth ships were also positioning themselves nearby, and Sarah found herself caught between 2 different chains of command with very different agendas. Sarah, Admiral Torres's voice came over the comm. I need you to dock with the Indomitable immediately. We have a lot of questions about today's events, and some of them can't wait for a full intelligence review. Admiral, Archer interjected, Miss Chen needs immediate medical evaluation and debriefing by qualified personnel. She's been through significant trauma and may be suffering from combat stress reactions. Sarah almost laughed at that. Combat stress was the least of her worries at the moment. Learning that her entire life had been shaped by intelligence operatives, that her parents had been murdered by alien sympathizers, and that she'd been unknowingly prepared for this moment since she was 14 years old. Those were the things that were really messing with her head. I'm fine, she transmitted to both ships. But I think we need to have this conversation face to face. Admiral Torres, Commander Archer, why don't you both come aboard the Lucky Penny? It's my ship after all, even if I'm just now finding out what it really is. There was a pause, then Torres responded first. Agreed. But Commander, I want a full explanation of Colonial Intelligence's involvement in this sector. The official reports indicated no special operations assets in this area. Admiral, some operations are classified beyond normal compartmentalization, Archer replied diplomatically, but I'm authorized to brief you on the relevant details. An hour later, Sarah found herself hosting 2 of the most senior military officers in colonial space in her small cargo ship's converted conference area. The difference between them was stark. Admiral Torres was everything Sarah expected from a fleet commander, crisp and professional with the bearing of someone used to making life and death decisions for thousands of people. Commander Archer, on the other hand, seemed to blend into the background even while sitting right in front of her, his presence somehow forgettable despite his obvious competence. Let's start with the basics, Torres said, activating a recording device. Miss Chen, please state your full name, age, and occupation for the record. Sarah Elizabeth Chen, 17 years old, civilian cargo pilot, Sarah replied, then added with a bitter smile, though apparently there's more to it than that. Archer leaned forward slightly. Sarah, what we're about to discuss is classified at the highest levels of colonial government. Before we proceed, I need you to understand that you have choices here. You can walk away from all of this, return to civilian life with appropriate financial compensation and protection, and never have to think about any of it again. And my other choice? You join us, Archer said simply. Become a full operative in the Colonial Intelligence Service. Help us build the network we need to protect human civilization from threats like the hegemony. Admiral Torres looked between them with growing understanding. You've been recruiting civilians, she said to Archer, creating sleeper assets throughout the outer colonies. We've been identifying people with the right combination of skills and motivation, Archer corrected. People who are already in positions where they can make a difference when the time comes. Sarah's situation was unique. Her parents were already operatives, and she inherited not just their genetic advantages but also their commitment to protecting innocent people. Sarah studied both officers, trying to process the magnitude of what she was being offered. If I join you, what exactly would I be doing? Flying around the galaxy in a weaponized cargo hauler, fighting alien invasions? Sometimes, Archer admitted. But more often, you'd be gathering intelligence, providing early warning of threats, and serving as a rapid response asset when conventional forces can't get somewhere in time. The outer colonies are vast, and the CDF can't be everywhere at once. Torres nodded thoughtfully. The tactical advantage you provided today was significant, she said to Sarah. Your ship's capabilities allowed us to project force in ways that confused and demoralized the enemy. But more importantly, your willingness to sacrifice yourself to protect others. That's the kind of leadership the Colonial Defense Force needs. You want me to join the CDF too? Sarah asked, feeling overwhelmed by the competing offers. I want to offer you a commission, Torres said. Fast track through the academy, specialized training in unconventional warfare, command of your own unit within 2 years. The CDF is changing, adapting to threats we never imagined when we were just worried about pirates and smugglers. Archer's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could sense his disapproval. Admiral, with respect, Miss Chen's talents would be wasted in a conventional military structure. What she did today required independent thinking and the willingness to operate outside normal protocols. What she did today was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. Torres replied sharply. She could have been killed a dozen times over, and if we'd lost her, we would have lost the intelligence she carried and the tactical advantages her ship provided. Sarah listened to them debate her future as if she weren't sitting right there, and suddenly she was 17 years old again, tired of adults making decisions about her life without consulting her.
"Stop," she said firmly, and both officers fell silent.
Just stop. You're talking about me like I'm some kind of weapon you're trying to decide how to deploy. She stood up and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars that had been her home for 3 years. Commander Archer, you said my parents were intelligence operatives. Did they have a choice about that? Did they volunteer, or were they recruited the same way you're trying to recruit me? They volunteered, Archer said quietly. They were civilian pilots who discovered evidence of hegemony infiltration networks and brought it to colonial intelligence. When we offered them the chance to help us investigate further, they accepted. And they were murdered for it, Sarah said, not really asking. Yes, they got too close to a major operation and their cover was blown. We tried to extract them, but... Archer's voice trailed off. Sarah turned back to face them. What about the people who killed them? Are they still out there? The question hung in the air for a long moment before Archer answered. Some of them. The hegemony spy network is extensive and well hidden. It's one of the reasons we need assets like you, people who can operate independently and aren't part of the official intelligence structure. Torres was watching Sarah with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent years evaluating potential officers. Miss Chen, whatever you decide, you've already proven yourself under fire. That's not something that can be taught in any academy. Sarah made her decision. I'll do it, she said, but held up a hand before either officer could respond. But I have conditions. First, I want to know everything about my parents' deaths. Who was involved, what they were investigating, all of it. Second, I keep the lucky penny and I keep flying her the way I want to fly her. And third, if I'm going to be risking my life for the colonies, then the colonies are going to start taking better care of their people. What do you mean by that last one? Torres asked. I mean mining stations like Kepler 442b shouldn't be left defenseless, Sarah replied. I mean civilian pilots shouldn't have to face down battle groups by themselves. I mean, if you want us to fight for human civilization, then you better make sure human civilization is worth fighting for. Archer smiled for the first time since coming aboard. I think we can work with those conditions. Torres nodded slowly. The CDF has been pushing for increased defensive installations throughout the outer colonies. Your demonstration today should help make the case for additional funding. All right then, Sarah said. I guess I'm officially whatever it is you people want me to be. But I have one more question. What happens now? The hegemony is going to adapt to what they learned here. They're not going to fall for the same tricks twice. Now, Archer said, his expression becoming serious again, we prepare for the real war, because what happened here today was just the opening move. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Colonial Defense Force Academy, watching new recruits practice combat maneuvers in modified civilian vessels. The program she had helped design was officially called Auxiliary Defense Initiative, but everyone called it the Lucky Penny Protocol. Much to her embarrassment, the young pilots below were learning the same lessons she had discovered in combat, that creativity and determination could overcome superior firepower, that the enemy's expectations could become their greatest weakness, and that sometimes a single person willing to make the ultimate sacrifice could change the course of history. Impressive results, Admiral Torres said, joining Sarah at the viewport. Recruitment is up 300% across the outer colonies, and the new defensive installations are ahead of schedule. It seems your demonstration had quite an impact. Sarah nodded, watching a 17-year-old pilot execute a perfect attack run against a simulated hegemony formation. It's strange seeing other people learn to do what I did. Part of me always thought I was just making it up as I went along. You were? Torres replied with a smile.
That's what made it so effective.
The hegemony has studied human military doctrine for decades, but they can't prepare for human improvisation. Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see the sprawling complex that had grown around the original academy. New facilities for intelligence training, advanced weapons development, and something the bureaucrats called unconventional warfare studies filled what had once been empty grassland. The transformation was remarkable, but Sarah knew it was only the beginning. "Any word from Commander Archer?" Torres asked. "He's still out there somewhere, building his network," Sarah replied. "Last I heard, he had operatives in place throughout the sector, all of them ordinary people with extraordinary capabilities when the situation requires it." It had taken months for Sarah to fully understand the scope of what Archer was creating. The Lucky Penny Protocol wasn't just about modified ships and hidden weapons. It was about identifying people throughout human space who had the right combination of skills, motivation, and strategic positioning to serve as early warning systems and rapid response assets. Farmers who could spot surveillance activities, merchants who could gather intelligence while conducting normal business, pilots who could become force multipliers when conventional military units weren't available. "The hegemony has been quiet since Kepler," Torres observed. "Intelligence suggests they're reassessing their invasion plans, trying to figure out how many assets like you they might face." Sarah's smile was grim. "Good, let them wonder. Let them spend time and resources preparing for threats that might not exist, while we build the actual defenses we need." Her communicator chimed with an incoming message, and Sarah's expression grew serious as she read the priority dispatch. "Admiral, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity in the Proxima sector. Large fleet movements, possible staging for another probe." Torres was already moving toward the command center. "How large?" "Bigger than Kepler," Sarah replied, following her. "Much bigger." The command center was buzzing with activity as intelligence officers analyzed the incoming data. Holographic displays showed the Proxima system, with red markers indicating hegemony fleet positions. The scale was sobering, at least 60 ships, including several super-heavy vessels that hadn't been seen in the earlier engagement. "They're not playing around this time," Torres muttered, studying the tactical display. "This isn't a probe. It's a full invasion force." Commander Hayes, the intelligence officer who had briefed Sarah months earlier, looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're also detecting unusual energy signatures from several of the hegemony vessels. It appears they've made significant technological upgrades since Kepler." Sarah felt a familiar chill as she studied the enemy formation. The hegemony had indeed learned from their defeat, and they were applying those lessons in ways that could prove devastating for human forces. "They're expecting us to use the same tactics that worked before," she said. "They've adapted their technology to counter EMP weapons and long-range targeting systems." "Which means we need to adapt too," Torres replied. "How long until they reach the Proxima colonies?" 4 days, Hayes reported. "But Admiral, there's something else. We're detecting transmissions suggesting they have intelligence on our defensive installations. They know about the new weapon platforms, the enhanced colonial militias, even some details about the Lucky Penny Protocol." The implications were staggering. Someone had provided the hegemony with detailed intelligence about human defensive preparations, which meant they could counter or avoid those defenses entirely. The advantage that had won the Battle of Kepler 482b was gone. "We have a spy," Sarah said quietly. "Someone with access to high-level information has been feeding intelligence to the enemy." Torres' expression was grim. "Commander Hayes, I want a full security review initiated immediately. Check everyone with access to classified information about our defensive preparations." "Admiral," Sarah said, "with respect, we don't have time for a full investigation. The hegemony fleet will reach Proxima in 4 days, and if they succeed there, they'll have a forward base for attacking the inner colonies." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah moved to the tactical display, highlighting the enemy formation. "We use their intelligence against them. They think they know what we're capable of, so we show them something completely different." She began sketching attack patterns on the holographic interface, her mind racing through possibilities. The Lucky Penny Protocol was never supposed to be a permanent solution. It was supposed to buy us time to develop real capabilities. "Well, we've had 6 months. Let's see what we've learned." Torres studied Sarah's proposed attack plan with growing interest. It was audacious. requiring precise coordination between conventional forces and the new auxiliary units. But it also took advantage of the enemy's expectations in ways that could prove decisive. This could work, Torres said slowly, but it would require committing every available asset in the sector. If we fail, there won't be anything left to defend the inner colonies. If we don't try, the inner colonies fall anyway, Sarah replied. Admiral, the hegemony has made one critical error in their planning. They're assuming we'll fight the same war we fought 6 months ago. But we're not the same people we were then. Over the next several hours, Sarah found herself at the center of the largest military planning operation in colonial history. The Lucky Penny Protocol had evolved far beyond its original scope, encompassing not just individual operatives but entire networks of civilian assets throughout human space. Merchants, miners, farmers, and transport pilots. All of them had been quietly prepared for this moment. Sarah, came Commander Archer's voice over a secure channel. I'm reading your tactical plan. It's ambitious, but it's also exactly what we trained for. Are your people ready? Sarah asked. They've been ready since Kepler, Archer replied. Every major shipping route, every mining operation, every colonial settlement has assets in place. The hegemony thinks they're facing the colonial defense force. They have no idea they're about to face an entire civilization that's learned to fight back. Sarah looked around the command center, seeing the faces of officers and analysts who had spent months preparing for this moment. They were scared, but they were also determined. The Battle of Kepler 442b had shown them what was possible when ordinary people refused to surrender to superior force. Admiral Torres, Sarah said, request permission to deploy with the advance elements. Denied, Torres replied immediately. You're too valuable to risk in the opening phase of the engagement. With respect, Admiral, this entire strategy depends on improvisation and adaptation. Those aren't things you can coordinate from a command center. They require people who are willing to make decisions under fire. Torres was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. But you're taking backup this time. A full squadron of Lucky Penny Protocol ships. All with experienced pilots, Sarah smiled, thinking of the teenagers she'd been training. Young people from throughout the colonies who had volunteered to serve as pilots in the Auxiliary Defense Force. They were brave, skilled, and most importantly, they understood what they were fighting for. Thank you, Admiral. We won't let you down. As the Lucky Penny prepared for departure, Sarah received a personal message from old Pete at the rebuilt Kepler mining station. Give 'em hell, kiddo, his gruff voice said over the comm. And remember, you're not just fighting for the colonies. You're fighting for the idea that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to. Sarah sealed her helmet and settled into the pilot's seat that had become as familiar as her own skin. Around her, 11 other modified civilian vessels prepared for jump, their pilots ready to face an enemy that outnumbered them 60-12. The odds were impossible. But then again, they always had been. All ships? This is Sarah Chen aboard the Lucky Penny, she transmitted. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. Today we prove that being human means never giving up, no matter what the odds. The stars streaked past as 12 small ships jumped toward